Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Tri-Nations Blether. Thank you very much for giving up your time, signing up and coming along to the session. It's great to see you all here and we're looking forward to the session this afternoon. There's been a series of Blethers across the Tri-Nations. My name is David Burgess. I'm Head of Professional Learning and Leadership within Education Scotland. And we've got colleagues across the three nations from Ireland, Wales and Scotland together here today. We've had a series of these Blethers before, which have always been positively received, and we're looking forward to the session we're going to have this afternoon. We're delighted to have representatives from across the three nations presenting today, and these colleagues are sharing their reflections around inquiry, and we've tried to get a range across different schools, different settings, and although our three countries are different, I'm sure you'll pick up common themes throughout all the presentations. I would encourage you to put questions in the chat pane, comments in the chat pane, and use that to engage and connect over the course of this session. As I say, the presenters will share the reflections, and they'll have 5 minutes to do that. But if you put comments and questions in the chat pane, we'll have an opportunity for some discussion after all our presenters have shared the reflections. So, as I say, warm welcome. The session has been recorded, but you'll be on mute in the background, and our presenters will be spotlighted when they are presenting today. So, before I do anything else, I'm just going to say again thank you and pass straight on to our first presenter, who is Vicky, and she's going to do a brief introduction about herself and then share her reflections around inquiry. Vicky.
Hey, thank you. Yes, so I'm Vicky Bergin and I'm the Deputy Head and Literacy Lead at Lakeside Primary School in Cardiff. And I carried out research into the teaching and learning of spelling with children aged between 6 and 11. But this presentation isn't so much about what I learned about spelling, but more about my actual research journey. So first, I'd like to outline why I embarked on this research and how I did it. So the original issue came from the school improvement plan. And we wanted to sort of focus on how we could reduce the gap between reading and spelling ages. So back in 2020, my school gained funding from the Leadership Academy to explore this issue. And we were also interested at how we could develop a culture of inquiry working with the staff at school. So part of the grant meant that I was assigned 2 academic mentors from Cardiff University, and their support proved to be invaluable throughout the whole research journey. Very early on, it was discussed and decided that listening to learners would be a really meaningful way for me to collect data. So I undertook in-depth conversations and dialogues with mixed ability children from children in years 2, 4 and 6. And these dialogues mainly focused on their experience of the single word spelling test that we carried out every term, how the children learned spellings and what strategies they used. And then I also talked to them about their engagement with and enjoyment of reading at school and at home. Next, I'd like to sort of jump to the end of my research journey, just to make it clear, though, that even though at times I was met by different challenges, the whole process was still so worthwhile, as I was given the space, support and motivation to really lift the lid on the current practice at my school. And because of this, I ended up with a much deeper understanding of just how much could be gained from giving learners an opportunity to talk about their learning experiences. And I think it's important to state this because it wasn't always an easy journey. Gaining a deeper understanding took a few ups and downs along the way. Now, I had some preconceived ideas about how my research was, going to evolve and what the end result was going to be. I thought maybe I would just need to develop some resources, and I thought it'd be quite a linear journey where I'd be supported by my mentors and end up with some nice neat answers at the end. However, not long into my research journey, I realized this wasn't going to be the case. I soon realized by taking a thinking and questioning stance, the outcome was not going to be an easy fix, such as just developing a set of resources. And by having the learners at the heart of my inquiry, it did become a little bit more like being on the M25, where there were many routes in different directions. And at the time, this felt quite overwhelming. And I did sort of begin to panic about what the end outcome was going to be and how much I was going to learn. And alongside this, I did have worries about, how was I going to fit in the time to read the literature, Did I have the necessary knowledge and expertise to carry out research? How was I going to fit in the time to carry out the research? You know, I was working by myself, so, you know, how was I going to manage this without anyone to collaborate with at school? You know, would the other staff be willing to sort of talk to me and have honest conversations during the research? And I felt that these worries could have maybe built up and got in the way of the inquiry had it not been from the significant support and expertise that I had from my academic mentors, because each meeting that I had with them really sort of helped to knock any, you know, the bricks down and remove any potential barriers. As well as feeling supported, my mentors also helped me to feel very valued throughout the whole study. And I was reminded that although not an expert in research, I was the expert at what was happening in my school, and therefore I should really value this teacher knowledge. As soon as I lifted the lid on Listen to Learners, I was really confronted with a wealth of information that would then shape our learning at Lakeside. You know, and I really became aware of the value of us understanding their perspectives, you know, and this provided sort of the data for analysis. And I think kind of it was more about the end result, sort of did end up with more questions to be answered about how children in our school learn. And I think it wasn't just about how we could improve spelling. I learned so much more about, you know, the school in general as well. I learned about how to carry out meaningful inquiry, and also the culture of the staff at the school. They were very willing to kind of have these honest dialogues, and the children were very, you know, willing to sort of talk as well. And I think that's important. You know, the children have to be in an environment where they feel happy to give honest answers. And also I learned the benefit of kind of talking to teachers individually in small groups as well, not just whole staff meetings. I found those honest dialogues about what was happening with spelling in our school really helped. And I think most importantly, I learned sort of little nuggets of information from the children that you wouldn't get if you didn't listen to learners. You know, I think just one example here, one child said, I think I'm a good speller because I just devour books. The words just come swirling into my brain box when I'm reading and they just stick somewhere. And I think kind of, you know, as a sort of sum up, I want to say that you can learn so much from listening to learners and carrying out this sort of research. And just to sort of quote Albert Einstein, who said, if we knew what we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? You know, so I think since this action research, as a school, we've started to embed this approach across the school, and it's now a SIP priority. And we acknowledge the importance of listening to learners alongside sort of honest professional dialogue. So I think there was so much to be learned from carrying out this type of research, even though at times it felt quite daunting. Okay, so thank you. And next, I would like to pass over to Will Howlett from Albany Primary School.
Hello, yeah, I'm Will Howlett, head teacher at Albany Primary School, also in Cardiff. It's an inner city school. We've got about 450 children, 45 different languages spoken in the school at present as well. So quite a busy inner city school. We undertook a research inquiry project. I think it was driven very much by the new professional teaching standards that came out in Wales. And there was a much larger focus on research and inquiry work as part of the professional standards. And that combined with some Erasmus projects I've been on, where I've been to international visits to Italy and Finland and seeing the level of trust, but also the time given to professional learning, the willingness to let staff explore, try things out, almost no failure. Try this out, we'll reflect on it, talk. So those things were going around in my head, along with the teaching standards coming around. Myself and my deputy head teacher, we'd spoken at length around the research and inquiry level and felt that very much it was something that maybe not all teaching staff would have confidence in undertaking things like that straight away, because it hadn't been something really that had been that present. And some people had been teaching a long time, maybe done a lot of research work and inquiry work when studying, but coming into profession on the ground working, not so present in their day-to-day work. So we actually made contact with a higher education institution, with a university, to say, we think we need help accessing that research, sort of finding the skills and relevant materials to help us really improve practice in our school in a way we could sort of foresee it. So we worked with the university, and they actually came out and over the year we allocated a lot of time. That was a key part of this. We set five separate training sessions. 2 were full days, 3 were half days, where two of the Master's Education Programme leaders came and worked with us. Each individual member of teaching staff, whatever level, NQTs, leadership, we had to identify a challenge. We had to pick up something that we were struggling with that year. It could have been reading. Some people chose something like the teaching of reading in a class. Some people were struggling to cope maybe with some emotional well-being needs in a class. For some people, leadership-wise, myself, it was around communication, making sure I was communicating well. So we all had different things that we were maybe thinking we need to do a little bit better, and with that little thing bugging us at that time. What we then worked on was group work, really. We discussed our problem, but we discussed it at length. So we were encouraged to talk about it and then re-talk about it with more detail and then re-talk about it again. And you sort of go full circle on the challenges then. And we were working in small groups, and those groups were deliberately set, sometimes with people with similar challenges, sometimes with people with conflicting challenges that maybe led that discussion even deeper, and sort of you were making points to each other around things. The key thing then was, once we dug a little bit deeper in our own thinking, we were then able to access some research or undertake inquiry related to it. That was supported by the university. They sent us some relevant, each individual had a couple of relevant articles to challenge their thinking on areas, which really helped, because I think part of the challenge for us as teachers is finding the time, but also finding the appropriate materials. And that was definitely a real benefit of it. But then we'd revisit our groups, or we moved into even different groups, and we'd explore again the challenges. Some people did pupil voice work and research based in class and inquiry around that nature, or working in school with other colleagues to go through it. Throughout the year, these journeys developed even further, really, and the level of conversation got deeper and deeper. And I think the key thing for it was the process. Similar to what Vicky's already said, it was actually going through the process. I think not everything worked. Not everyone could say we successfully achieved what we set out to do. However, there was a journey, and the journey was around trying things out, not failing, reflecting, how can we develop this further, trying something else and moving on. And I think it really changed our culture as a school. So we're now much more reflective. We try something, we stop. We don't always expect it to work. We don't always expect it to fail either. We hope sometimes it will work. But the key thing is those discussions we have, the trust we have in each other. And also, I think it's meant people are much more willing to move things forward, and try things out, because there is no failure. That's very much the ethos here at Albany now. Being more reflective, as I say, is key. We still work with the university. We still work with them for accessing some information. They no longer come in and spend the time with us, but that relationship is there as well, because sometimes if we're trying to improve a particular area on our school improvement, we then can say, have you got any discussion points, relevant articles that we could use to support this? And I think, that link and having that support has moved us forwards. But we're, other than checking in with them every now and then, we kind of are independently now taking the inquiry forward and able to do this. But our key learning from the whole project was, not everything works. There's no failure, but trust in the process and see it through. Because whatever that endpoint is, you will have learned something. And staff had a very powerful session at the end of the year, where they developed a poster that showed their own individual learning journey. There was no big writing, it was a poster, and it was able to show actually that even though you might not have achieved that end point, look at what you have gained. And that's me. I'm going to now hand on to Mary.
Thanks, Will. My name is Mary Lafferty. I'm a teacher in North Donegal. And I suppose my journey with inquiry started about 10 years ago, when I worked as the homeschool liaison officer, because we're a JESH school with my local primary school. And we found that one of our feeder schools, there was a real serious, I suppose, deficiency in language for young people, or for junior infants, so kids coming into school at 3 and 4, which isn't the kids that I work with, but that was my introductory to inquiry. And we led out in a project that just looked at trying to develop and identify where there was language barriers. And then I suppose I would have moved on then to examine developing a restorative school in my own school. And I worked with one other colleague, and we set about embedding restorative practice as an approach within our culture. And that would have all sort of happened maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And now I'm in a position where I have started gathering a professional learning community and developing a professional learning community within my workspace. So what brought me here really, I suppose, was I wasn't a comment. It was a very rich place for conversation around professional development and where education was. And when I went back to school about a year ago, I really missed that opportunity to talk to colleagues about teaching and learning, and not just the day-to-day things that we get bogged down in sometimes in schools. But I really struggled to find time to have those conversations. So I met with the principal, and we developed, or with his permission, I was allowed to set up a professional learning community with my colleagues. So it was an open invitation through all the school. And from that, we have a team of about 11 or 12 people, and we are focusing on feedback and formative feedback to students. So we started last year, but with COVID and various work practices and different lunch breaks, it was really difficult to meet. So we only really managed to set up the focus on feedback. We've met this year, we've set our targets. We're going to be employing the Department of Education have a system of school self-evaluation, a 6-step program. So we're going to adapt that for what we're doing. Engaging in that as well, we are also very conscious of the student voice, and it's fine for us to develop a system of feedback, but if the students aren't interested, it's not really going to work. So in the initial stages of our professional learning community and setting it up, it became very evident that there was a few people within our group that had a lot of experience that I wasn't aware of at the time, and they themselves had developed methods for feedback for some of their students, which cut down on their workload, but also meant that students could receive very personalized feedback. So what we're planning to do is take that system, roll it out across within the team, and tweak it for our own subjects. And between now and Easter, we're hoping that we can fine-tune that to a system that we feel would be generic enough for all subject areas within the school, but also would allow us to personalize it for ourselves within our subject space. So it's really exciting times. It's been amazing working with colleagues. We're a large school, we have over 1,100 students. These are teachers that I would never meet on a day-to-day basis within my school, because we've got three different staff rooms. So it's really interesting. Now, tying in with that, I suppose, and the whole professional learning aspect, is we're really conscious that not everybody wants to be involved in the professional learning community. So what we've also done is we've set up sharing spaces for staff, just for everybody. So we have a sharing library set up where teachers can share books that they've read and that they've enjoyed around education. Also, we're going to have breakfast bites once a term, and it's BYTE, but basically we're going to have a small breakfast in the morning for half an hour, and one of my colleagues is going to deliver the first one on retrieval practice, and the idea is that all staff members can attend. So while we're having a focus on feedback at the moment, our whole thing is to try and develop this sense of collegiality, collaborative learning for staff, and looking at where's the gaps that we feel exist in our school, in our context, that we can develop ourselves as a staff for our own students, and to try and enhance their strengths and their weaknesses. So that's really where we're at. It's really enjoyable. It's brilliant talking to other colleagues that you wouldn't normally get, and we're making the time, and time is very difficult to find, but it is worthwhile, and it has been an immense journey. The benefits for the students will be unbelievable if we have a system of feedback that they recognize, that's consistently used by all staff. But the benefit for me as a staff is that I'm getting to know my colleagues, and I am learning from them in immense ways. So it has been really, really rich journey, and one that I'm hoping to continue long into the future. And I'm passing you on now to Connor, so thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Connor Hutchison. I'm a business and education teacher at the High School of Glasgow, which is a private independent school in the West End of Glasgow. And my research interest and focus on practitioner inquiry has looked at retrieval practice. So I had started off by completing the Education Scotland teacher leadership programme, and I was looking at, given my context and some of the challenges that pupils face around, you know, maybe taking exams very seriously, you know, kind of summative assessments, I thought, how do I go about trying to lower the anxiety that some of these pupils might be facing? So Kate Jones had just released a book on retrieval practice about embedding low stakes assessment in your kind of day-to-day teaching, using studying and these kind of low stakes assessment practices as a revision technique. So I started working with a higher business management class, looking at how do I, one, improve their exam technique, but build in these low stakes assessments to overall improve their performance in, you know, final exams, unit tests, and the kind of build up to the final exam. So what I did was I looked at implementing weekly low stakes assessments with that class. And what I noticed was the feedback from them was really strong. I mean, at the start, they didn't particularly enjoy it. However, as time went on, they started to see that they were able to approach questions with much more confidence. They had a much better understanding of command words. And as that confidence built, they were much more willing to take risks with their learning and push themselves a bit harder. And the feedback from the pupils was excellent. And really, the data that I got back in terms of the numerical data was that many of the pupils significantly improved their grades. In fact, some actually moving up 2 grade bands. But it really wasn't always about just getting the best grade. It was more about trying to reduce that anxiety that they were feeling in relation to final assessments. And as that has evolved and grown over the last couple of years, and I've started looking at other areas of, you know, research interest, what I've noticed about practitioner inquiry is that it really enables this collective professionalism with colleagues. It really gives you the opportunity to speak to colleagues with a real conviction about what you're doing and a real sense of kind of, you know, professional responsibility and, you know, respect for, you know, your practice, that you can actually go and share that with them and what you're doing in your classroom. And as more colleagues have undertaken practitioner inquiry, there's really been a sense of a kind of shared language across the school that people can feed into and, you know, share their learning. At the high school, we spoke about what we called silos of practice, where teachers and, you know, their classrooms are all doing great things, but wasn't necessarily being shared as well as it could have been. So by enabling staff to have that time in that space to share their learning, that expertise is shared, and that's really beneficial for the pupils. But I did see one of the comments in the comments box, and it said, I think it was Linda Bell who said, inquiry it can be messy. And I actually had wrote down that practitioner inquiry is an emotional journey. She's absolutely right. Practitioner inquiry is not necessarily always going to go well. It's not always going to be the result that you thought you would get, but that can actually be really interesting and very informative for your practice as you kind of move forward. And more recently, I've looked at sharing some of the work I've been doing with Education Scotland, looking at writing a blog around the importance of practitioner inquiry and teacher agency. And I can see David Burgess has just shared that. Thank you, David, which explores in a little bit more detail the value of practitioner inquiry from a class teacher's perspective. And I'll finish up now, but I'll move on to Sinead. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sinead Foley, and I'm a primary teacher in Greystones in County Wicklow. I'm currently on secondment with the PDST as a health and wellbeing advisor. So a number of years ago, I undertook master's research in the area of child well-being. And as part of this research, I worked with teachers to gain their insights and perceptions around this area. And amongst other things, what emerged from the research was that teachers desired greater support and discussion in this area. And they also felt that there was a need to bridge the gap between current governmental policy and practice. So I was fortunate enough to receive a bursary from the Teaching Council that year, and I decided to use it to create a professional learning community amongst schools in my local area. The idea being that each school would send representatives to, I suppose, focus on the area of well-being, both staff and child well-being. Mary spoke about the importance of, creating and had the power of creating a professional learning community within her own organisation, and I think that is completely valuable. But in this context, I knew that there was a great deal of knowledge and skill in this topic in the area, and I wanted to harness it. So I approached my leadership team. I was a member of it at the time, and after discussion with them, I decided to put it out to local principals. And within a short amount of time, 8 local schools had gotten back saying that they would be willing to participate. The aim of the PLC, I suppose, was to foster a safe space to share communal learning around the topic, while also engaging with relevant research. The piece about relevant research was obviously important to the Teaching Council who were funding us, but equally it was important to me as a teacher researcher. I know the power of engaging with research, and I wanted to help teachers who are on the ground just like me develop those skills. Participants had the opportunity to discuss best practice, to share ongoing initiatives in their own context, to participate in group and individual presentations, all the while engaging with research and developing their capacity to do so. As I mentioned, we were lucky enough to have some funding, and we chose as a group to spend this on accessing expert speakers who, to develop our own CPD in this area. Each time before we had a speaker in to talk to us, we studied 2 pieces of research and discussed them as a group. Around that, it was really important that, I've learned that the words engaging with research can be daunting for educators, and I remember being in that space myself. So the beauty of this project was that the teachers, the participants, chose the speakers themselves, they chose the topic area. So then when it came to engaging with a piece of research, it seemed less daunting to them. I think that's key to the success of any project. You need to be able to meet people where they're at in front of you and to be cognizant of where people are coming from. The project led to a really rich learning experience in the form of a small joint action research project between a few schools around the topic of yard time well-being. It was something that was very important to me, was that we share our learning back in our own schools. We're in a profession that is time poor, and we have to box clever and think of ways to do this. So each school had autonomy of how they chose to share their information. May have been some, in my own context, we use our mandatory Crow Park hours a few minutes at the beginning of each session. Other schools use small group practice, emails, and so on. A big advantage of the project was that we decided to set up a TREX, or a Teachers Research Exchange Forum. This is a free forum. It works almost like a Facebook group, but it's designed specifically for teacher educators. And it meant that every time we engaged with a piece of research, I was able to put it up. We could form a thread underneath of our thoughts. Same, but when we had speakers in, we could share opinions and feedback. It proved invaluable, to be honest, throughout COVID. I don't know if the project would have survived COVID otherwise. And equally, the intermittent sharing of learning and websites and knowledge and ideas, it was a really useful tool. So in short, the project involved 8 local schools. It ran for 3 years, and we met every 3 months throughout that time. We now meet on a yearly basis just to keep those relationships alive.
My name's James Kerr, and as you probably can guess, I'm a head teacher from Glasgow, from the West End of Glasgow in St Paul's. And my journey, I suppose, with professional inquiry really arose from the absolute necessity to meet the needs of the pupils in our school. And it was a collective, community-focused approach to kind of working with our pupils. the school that I'm in, and really to kind of get a bit of a background, because it's really important to understand that, is within an area of really high deprivation, with multiple layers of poverty, and this really impacts on the lives of our children in so many different ways. But it's also a very culturally diverse and really interesting community. We have over 50% of our children with an EAL background, and the problem we also have is that that's compounded by poverty and the fact that many of their parents have not really had much education themselves and are illiterate. And this was really difficult for us in moving forward. And it was such an immense challenge that I would say that the biggest thing that I have learned through all of this is that we have to trust each other. And that trust was the kind of overarching theme of everything that we did in moving forward as a staff and as a school in trying to support our parents and our children. Luckily, I mean, it's not luckily, it's a lot of hard work has gone into building a really strong staff team where people do work really well together. And I've got a wee quote here from Pasi Salberg, whom I love, and he wrote it in Finnish Leadership. Head teachers should be given greater trust to take their school forward, and teachers should be trusted more, full stop. And I think that is something that we have really learned through our professional inquiry journey in working with our children. So really what we wanted to try and do was to develop a greater understanding of our cultural diversity and complexity of our school, and really how that impacted on our learners. This was actually really difficult because it did kind of bring us to a personal place. And what we discovered is that in going into this journey of looking at everyone else's culture, we had to look at our own fears about race and ethnicity, and perhaps maybe our own prejudices as well. And we felt that in order to move forward, we really need to create a place of trust and safety in order to have open and honest conversations. And we felt that that was vitally important. It was also interesting for us to note that when we started this, there was actually very little local, even British, Scottish research in this area, and a lot of the work that we got and a lot of the information, the research we got was from America. So we felt that has changed over the period of time, but it was quite an interesting point to note. We started from the point of view that in our school, predominantly, the staff were white European adults coming from that cultural background, and that we had to ensure that our students felt valued and that they were affiliated to the culture of the school. So the first thing we did was to ask our students what they thought. And it was really interesting actually, because we did, as a staff, each staff member worked with their own class, and basically separately, the teachers filled in a questionnaire and the teachers and the children filled in a questionnaire, and there were major discrepancies in the answers between the two sets of people, because when we asked the children, did the teachers understand their ethnicity and race, most of the children said yes, but most of the teachers said they didn't understand ethnicity and race. And one of the really important ones was, do we talk about ethnicity and race in school? And our teachers, 100% of them said we did, and only 17% of our pupils said that they felt that they were engaged in these kind of conversations. So in order to really start this journey, we had to start and put our pupils at the centre to try and understand where they were coming from. So one of the things that we really did then was ask the teachers to really become researchers in their own class and to think about what the culture and ethnicity of their class was. And we found this model, that the Funds of Knowledge matrix that was put together by researchers Louise Moll and Kathy Amante, and it went back to 2001. But what it enabled us, our teachers, to do is to really become researchers of the culture of their class. They were able to really dig down into the experiences children had at home and how that they felt about themselves as learners. And that was a really interesting and helpful starting point for us because it enabled us then to plan and to take forward various experiences that children could buy into and understand. This is not a finished product by any manner of means. It's an ongoing thing. The culture of our school changes all the time. And basically, we have to continually refocusing and going back in and asking ourselves, are we meeting the needs of our pupils? But what it has done is enabled us to look at our curriculum, to look at the texts we're using, to look at everything that we're doing, in order to see that we are ensuring that our pupils are culturally represented. And it also has given the teachers a real chance to reflect on their own practice. We come together now as a staff regularly to really reflect and think about what we are doing and the impact that's having on our pupils. I'm running out of time, but this took us to a national level. And we worked at a national, with Education Scotland at a national level. And I'm hoping that some of the research that we have done has nudged some of the research that has been undertaken nationally. We have participated in things like building racial literacy, and we're hoping that working with people across Scotland, that will really inform what we're doing in school. Okay, thank you. I think that's my time up. And I'm going to pass back to Anna May and Donald.
Thank you, James. Anna May Rooney here from the Centre for School Leadership in Ireland, and my colleague Donald O'Reilly and myself will take this Q&A session for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And we're really looking forward to it, folks, because the chat has been really busy. There have been a lot of questions, a lot of comments, and we're delighted with the interest in our Blether this afternoon or this evening. So first of all, a sincere thank you to our presenters, Vicky and Will and Mary and Connor and Sinead and James. Really, really interesting pieces all around. And the chat is telling us that those of you who are listening to us this evening are really, really enjoying the presentations. So thank you to each and every one for superb presentations. I'm just going to quickly give an overview of what's in the chat. So many people like Kenny are agreeing with the philosophy of investing and listening to learners. And the comment, I just devour books, Susan commented on that. Linda talks about the leadership team colleagues being involved in inquiry, which is really great. The whole focus on the journey rather than the outcome from Will, Susie really appreciated that. Question from Susan, I'll begin here and then I'll hand over to my colleague Donald. Susan wants to know, did it take significant time to establish trust in a talking culture? I think she was asking you that, Will, please, if that's okay to ask you that.
Yes, it did. I think because obviously we partnered up with the university to start this journey, and I would say the first session, because it was such a new way of working, was a little bit, what is this about? And why are we doing this and where's it going to go? And some staff left it feeling, oh, I can see this moving forward. Other staff were a little bit apprehensive about the whole journey and probably a little bit guarded in initial conversations. And I think we can be perfectionists in our job sometimes and don't want to say what we're struggling with. So maybe picked the usual quick fix idea that it's just something I can do and sort out next week. But I would say it did take the whole year in the way of spending that time working through it. And when we got to the end and there was no big ask either, that actually that everyone's journey was recognised and valued the same, whether they achieved the intended outcome, you know, when they did their poster at the end, or whether it went a different way and different things happened. I think people realised that they'd done something personal to them. They'd worked over a long period of time on it, developed, you know, used inquiry, used research, and got to an end point, and nobody failed or nobody passed. That's not the right term, but it was. But actually, everyone discussed and everyone learned about each other's, and then we were able then to move into the next year and do a similar process, different challenges, and people were going into that with a totally different mindset, because again, they knew the journey we were going to be on, and everything we do in moving the school forwards now, everyone knows that things will go well and other things won't, but it doesn't matter. It's part of it, and you know, and it's not. So It did take a long time, and I think with anything like this, being totally honest, I think we had 27 staff that embarked upon it and went through that whole journey together at all levels. And even at the end of it, and even still now, are 100% of them fully bought into it? Probably not, but nearly all of them are. And I think even people maybe that haven't fully embraced it benefit from it. That's a key thing as well. I think we all move forward with it. So it did take a while, but the culture is there now. But actually going through the whole journey and not changing and sticking to what you're doing was important.
Thank you, Will. And I'm full of admiration for your patience and your acceptance. And I think there's a learning in that for us all. Things don't happen overnight. They take time. People need time to buy in, to become comfortable, and for the trust to build. I think that comes across very clearly from you. Over to you, Donal.
Thank you, Anna-May. I'd just like to note to the participants, to the presenters and the participants, I think this has been one of our busiest chats of all the Blethers, so well done to everybody. Just listening to all of you, and again, just to recap from what I was hearing, I heard learner voice coming out strong in many of the presentations, staff autonomy as well, that this, which seemed to lend to the success of all of this. Relationships and trust, whilst they're not mentioned a lot, that's what's coming out. That there's strong relationships, strong trust being built, leading into going into the safe space, communities of learning, and of course, then almost all of you have mentioned the unintended outcomes, and all of them have been positive unintended consequences, which is good as well. A question for Mary, probably linked into the Sinead slightly as well. The communities of practice, or the professional learning network, in short, Mary, first, how often did they meet, and then did the professional community identify and decide their own focus, which was feedback, or were the focus points linked to a school improvement plan? That comes in from Dale.
Well, I suppose we're a DASH school, so our school improvement plan has to be linked to DASH targets. So while feedback would be related to attainment, it isn't necessarily linked in directly into our school improvement plan. The topic itself was decided very much by the people involved. I just basically, no more than Sinead, I'm facilitating a conversation, but with the benefit of the end product will benefit me as well in my practice. So it was just thrown out there, what were people's interests and what did they want to go with, and feedback was the one that came up the most. And then I suppose just to tie it in, like we're in Ireland, we're going through the curricular change junior cycle, and if you look at formative assessment, feedback would be one of the pillars of that. So it linked very well with where we're going as a school and the focus that the department would have put in on school development anyway, but not directly. So if you know what I mean, there's links there. If anybody wanted us to draw links, definitely we could do it, but very much it's teacher driven, and it's what we wanted to do to improve our students' teaching and learning within our context. Oh, I'm sorry, and we would meet, we're hoping to meet maybe once or twice a term, but we know that people are really busy, so we've decided that we will communicate electronically and meet as necessary.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mary. Back to you, Anna-May.
Yeah, thanks again, Mary. Just another few comments. David is talking about the culture to support inquiry, and Mary makes the point of seeing mistakes as learning. And I think that that's coming very strongly through all your presentations. Kat speaks about accessing current research is a barrier. And we have Linda then telling us about the General Teaching Council in Scotland, providing access to that. So there's a question that goes to Sinead to just expand a little bit more on the T-Rex platform in Ireland and what that is about, Sinead. And I know you put it into the chat, but just a couple of words on that, please, if that's okay.
So T-Rex is a fantastic initiative. It's called the Teachers Research Exchange, and it's an online forum. It's very simple to use, and it's like an online forum for teacher educators. It kind of does what it says on the tin. However, it has the advantage of allowing you to access the research of other people, to connect with people who are researching the same area as you if you wish, or you could do as my group did and make your own forum, a private communication forum. And it has what are called T-Rex bites, and they summarize research really succinctly and really well. I hope that has answered it, Anna-May.
That's perfect, Sinead. Thank you very much. And Donal, if it's okay, may I go to Vicky with a question, because I omitted to ask her something that was in my mind. Vicky, you spoke very, very highly about your academic mentors and how much they meant to your research. Yeah. I'm just wondering, it's a very simple question. What kind of qualities did they have as people that, you know, enabled to have that relationship? You said something really, really important. You said that you understood that you weren't expected to be an expert on research. You were expected to be an expert in your area. And I'm just wondering how they managed to build that thinking in you.
I think when I started the research, I had this idea of kind of what the outcome was going to be. And then when I actually started listening to learners, I thought, what am I going to do with this wealth of information? What does it mean? Where am I going with it? And what they helped me to do was say, look, this is what listening to learners looks like. You know, listening to learners is going to give you a wealth of information, and then just pick up the threads of where, you know, how that will then kind of help your school to move forward. But talking about the kind of literature, what they also did was provided the literature for me and said, I found this article, and it would literally be kind of 2 sides long, and they'd say, read this about spelling. It will really help you to kind of make sense of what you're learning about your children. So I think, you know, that was really important. I haven't got time to go away and read massive books and, you know, and journals, but they would point me in the right direction of really good literature to read, which kind of helped to make sense of everything I was finding out. So it was all, you know, way along the sort of journey, and then making sense of it. At the end, I'd go, I've got all this information. What do I do with it? And I said, okay, let's pick out those themes. And this is what research is about. It's not about finding a magic answer at the end. It's about your school. Where are you going to move forward with what you found out? So I did find that support really valuable.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Will I hand back over to you, Donal?
Yeah, just one observation, I put the link into the chat. Will mentioned his involvement in Erasmus, which I have been involved in as well. But as part of the Erasmus program, there's a fantastic resource there called the School Education Gateway. And on that, then there's a fantastic course for not yourselves who are engaged in action research, but anybody on staff or in your PLN that you'd like to nudge forward. And there's a course there on teachers becoming action research and looking at action research in the class. It's only an hour. You get a professional certificate for it, but it's available on that link, the School Education Gateway. You do have to set up an account, and it's free and all that. There's a question after coming in there from Susie around the culture, the culture in the last presentation from Wales. Is recognition of cultural and practitioner inquiry influences something we should be looking more at depth within our own countries?
I would say it is really beneficial, and kind of you do have to build that culture within your school. It doesn't happen, you know, I think Will was saying, it doesn't happen straight away. But, you know, not being afraid kind of on the journey if it's not getting the answers that you want, but you do learn so much. It is very valuable. You know, I would recommend it. It does take some time, and you have to, you know, have a leadership team that allows you that time and also sees the benefit in it. You know, we sort of kind of stopped doing so many questionnaires and things because we said questionnaires do have a place sometimes, but actually if you want a more in-depth understanding of what's happening in you know, with learning in your school, then this way of working is really good.
Thank you, Vicky. And just in relation to time, you go to any staff in the world, I'd say at this stage, and they say time, we don't have any of it. And I think Sinead, you summed it up lovely. We're time poor. I'm not sure your exact phrase, but it was very well put. But is there any tips from the panel here for the listeners on where to seize that time? Any simple practical solutions? The breakfast bites was commented there, Mary. Everybody likes a bit of a free meal, and if you can get in early and get a free scone and have a chat. But is there any tips from the panelists? I'll throw it out there to all of you for those of us, those who have joined us this afternoon.
I think I would say it's, you know, obviously I'm head teacher, so I'm in a privileged position.
So you've loads of time off.
I could make that time, and I think But so I know it's not, I'm speaking from that role, but I had to do it for it to work. If I didn't make time available in our sort of CPD professional learning sessions to get this going, we can't allocate necessarily the same amount of time now every year going forwards, but the process, the culture, that understanding is there. So it does take commitment, and probably there's the risk element of it is there's that fear of wasted time. And I think people realizing that having a conversation about learning and being reflective and really thinking about it isn't wasted time. It's not a chat. Sometimes people, it's like, oh, we're not doing anything because we're not writing something down. We're not, and I think that's the key thing, is actually valuing those conversations and realizing they are having an impact. They are making a difference. That's a key thing, is learning that time can be well used, and it doesn't always have to create a thing, I suppose, which sometimes we found ourselves always trying to do.
Okay, and like Sinead mentioned as well, there's different ways of sharing that learning as well. It doesn't always have to be because different people have different space in their day at different times. James, I'll just come into you there, and then Mary, I'll get you next.
So it's just, I suppose, about time as well. And I think, kind of echoing what Will said there about impact. And I think that's what we found was really important, because people could see that it was making a difference, that the work that they were actually doing, and it was incorporated into, the kind of action research approach, I suppose, in class, and having what was happening during the day as part of that research journey. I think it is vitally important. So it's not, I'm not going to say to someone, right, I want you to go after school and write a 3,000-word essay on what you think the culture of your class is and how that's going to change. But actually, experiencing that and building that into what people were actually doing and seeing the difference that was making, and then having time. And I think that was the other thing that, as a management team, as a school, we really valued this work that we were doing. We could see the absolute value in it. We could see the difference it was making. We could see how children were becoming more engaged. So that drove us on. And also that kind of toing and froing of having that constant dialogue between staff members, then going out to different people in the community, etc. That made it a live thing, and I think that that's really important. If people think that inquiry is something that they do, between 3 and 4 on a Friday, then it's not going to have the impact. But if it's something that's it's integral to their everyday, then I think it makes a big difference, and people can see the point of it.
Thank you very much, James. While you're in it, I see, as you mentioned, community, there was a question about the groups in the community that you linked in with. You might respond there in the chat if you don't mind. And Mary, I'll go to you. I'll go to you, Mary, before handing back to Academi.
Yeah, just on time, I suppose briefly for us, it's a win-win situation, because when we develop our feedback mechanism that we're going to be using in the school, it's going to cut down on the workload of every single teacher, because all the students are going to get used to it. So in our PLC, we have a few English teachers, and one of them is the person who's already designed something. And she said her workload in correcting essays for 20 or 30 students has decreased immensely. She has so much extra time available to her as a result of this. So to hear somebody saying that, that just beats any argument about finding 20 minutes or half an hour of your lunch break. So it's a win-win for us.
Thanks, Mary. I'll hand you back to Academi there now.
And just we have a rule in our blethers that we always finish on time, so it's the hour almost. But I wanted to just go back to Conor as a final piece. And Conor, you said something in the middle of your presentation. You said that inquiry is an emotional journey. Okay, so will you just expand on what that meant for you as you took part in your own inquiry, please, if that's okay? Conor, yes, sorry.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So I'll try. So yeah, inquiry is an emotional process in that, as many of the participants are saying tonight, it's quite a time commitment. You are giving quite a lot of yourself. I suppose I started it with the end point that I thought I was going to get always a positive outcome, and if I think about my own inquiry, it didn't always go in a positive way. There were some pupils who didn't respond to it as well as what I thought they would have, and it required maybe a little bit of cajoling round. you know, others performed really well. But also, it's not always going to be recognised by every colleague that what you're doing is you know, the kind of right thing. And so I suppose that emotional journey is that working with colleagues as well, getting them on board. So many of, you know, the speakers have spoke about culture, and really it is that culture that underpins it. It's that human connection rather than just all the kind of hard data. So I suppose that emotional journey for me is that you are really going on that journey. You might not get the result that you want, and if you're putting in all this time and then suddenly you're not getting what you think is a positive outcome, you can be a little bit disheartened. But I would say just kind of stick with it. And you know, Linda, she asked the question about how are we making it sustainable. I think, you know, part of that is senior management teams, you know, as well, saying, recognizing this is something of value. This is a collective thing we can do together. At the high school, we reduced our contact time by 1 period for every teacher to allow staff the time to engage in that professional learning. So it's about recognizing, I suppose, that it does have value. But it is an emotional journey because you're dealing with people. So I suppose, yeah, and you're dealing with lots of young people who are all very different. So hopefully that clarifies and kind of adds to that, Anime.
Absolutely, Conor, and much appreciated. And thanks to each and every one of you again.
I'm sure everyone will agree this afternoon has been so good. And I'm really sorry, actually, that this International Blether is coming to an end. So a big thank you to our facilitators and tech support from the teams in Scotland, Ireland and Wales for organising the event. And a very special thanks, of course, to our great speakers for being so honest in sharing your personal experiences and what you've all described as the emotional and messy journey that is inquiry and professional learning, but also the positive impact it's having. Really, really refreshing to hear. It's been a real privilege to listen to you all, and I think you should all be very proud of the work you're doing. It's been both engaging and motivational. So in closing, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and ask if you could share a few final thoughts in the chat before you sign off. 2 parts to it. What's had an impact on you this afternoon? And how are you going to turn that into action? We look forward to receiving those as you sign off. Diolch yn fawr iawn a noswaith dda. Thank you very much and good evening.